MIP Project Management in Practice Conference this past June. That was, I would say, a smashing success. Your talk as well as the overall presentation. So thank you for presenting, and I'm glad to return the favor. So today I'd like to talk to you about the sustainability of project value, or maybe the value of project sustainability, or maybe the sustainability of project value, or maybe they're the same thing. So let's discuss this. The main theme will be value. So first, what you'll hear today, I'm getting people in the waiting room. I'm just admitting them. I don't know if you have that ability, Mustafa. But
yes, we are doing that.
You're doing it. Okay. Then I will ignore them. I just hate to have people in the waiting rooms. Okay, as long as you're doing it, we're fine. So a little bit about me and my career. Then what is value? That will actually lead into what is value. When do projects deliver value, and how do they deliver value? It's going to relate very well to Dr. Sadi Adra's talk as well. Then we'll take a slight shift and say, hey, how does this connect to sustainability? And does the Pmbok guide, the new edition out in July, does it have anything to say about this? And then I will end with a brief discussion of how we've actually changed our curricula at Boston University, which is a fairly large school of something like 30,000 students, how we've changed the curriculum to integrate this into the curriculum, even before the 7th edition came out. So a little bit about myself. I started my career a long time ago. I had here, don't anymore. And it was at that time a company called Western Electric. That became AT&T and other companies, Lucent, Alcatel-Lucent, and now Nokia. I worked for this company for over 40 years, never taking any action to change companies, but the company changed around me, and this may have happened to some of you as well. For the last 30 years, in one form or another, whether it was the title or not, I worked as kind of a learning and development director. Towards the end of my career, serving about 2,700 project managers, both internal project managers overseeing, let's say, software updates inside the company or manufacturing line updates, as well as customer-facing PMs who were turning over gigantic networks to companies like Singtel, China Unicom, Deutsche Telekom, Verizon, Comcast, and so forth. It was through that career, and also in parallel teaching at university, teaching technical courses and PM courses, that I learned that the real job of a project manager is really project leader. I think we're mistitled, and that their main value was, ironically, the delivery of value. And in particular at Nokia, one of the things I'm particularly proud of is the conveyance of knowledge, project management knowledge amongst and between project managers. And one of the things I'm most proud of is that we established a knowledge sharing database, a lessons learned database that's still used today. So I would say that that has lasting value, which brings us back around to talking about value. What is value? Well, in some cases, it's really easy to figure this out. For example, I don't know how popular Scrabble, the game Scrabble, is around the world, but I think it's fairly well played globally. In that case, value is outstandingly clear. There's a number associated with each letter. And we know, for example, that V, the letter V, has a value of 4. So we want to put that on a triple letter score, for example, because we know about its value. This is not so clear in project management, and it's definitely not as clear in the world we all work in, PMO world, we'll call it. So what is value? This is a dictionary definition, one I like. It's the regard that something is held to deserve, the importance, the worth, or the usefulness of something. And I've highlighted the word usefulness, and I'll come to this in a minute, but think about what usefulness means. It means that whatever your project's product was, the service, the physical widget that you created, it has to be put into use, which implies very strongly the measure of time. And as project managers, we hand off our project. We have a kind of an end date, and we don't think about time or the time that the product is put into operation. So I'll cover that more in a moment. So if you plug in that root definition of value and you try to reduce the number of words, which even though I'm a lecturer, I tried to reduce the number of words, and we add in the fairly recent concepts that PMI and others have pushed on benefits realization management, we end up with a definition, a project-oriented definition of value that reads something like this: ensuring that projects deliver something useful, as opposed to limiting our skills, our project management skills, to assuring the usual, and I'll make the triangle here, the usual triple constraint or iron triangle aspects of budget or cost, time or schedule, scope or requirements, or sometimes quality. That's what we're usually focused on, is that triangle. But I think that kind of also puts blinders on us in terms of usefulness, because we're making sure that we deliver whatever it is on time, but we're not thinking about what it does in time, over time. So the bottom line is we focus on this particular picture. Maybe it's not the same picture for you, but what I call the ribbon cutting ceremony. You can't measure usefulness at the ribbon cutting ceremony. At that point, you just have the ability to tell the world that the product of your project is available. That's all you've done, and that's great. But it doesn't mean that your project's product has been useful. And it's not on the slide, but you can give an example. Here in the US, we had a water cutover in the city of Flint, Michigan. And I think if it would be valuable to check this out if you haven't heard about it. It was very large news, a very big news story in the United States, where the town of Flint, Michigan, it's a fairly large city in Michigan, cut over their water supply from the Detroit River to the Flint River. When they did so, they had a big ribbon cutting ceremony. Everyone raised a glass of the new Flint water and toasted each other. But in the following months, it was revealed that the water being supplied to individuals' homes, I mean, just as an exaggeration, in some cases was almost flammable, very toxic. It had lead and other toxins in it. Lots of reasons why this happened. But I really want to focus on the point that they had this ribbon cutting ceremony, and the project managers may have considered that cutover project done, but it wasn't really useful. In fact, it had negative value. It was hurting and killing people. So it's something to check out. I don't have a reference here, but if you just search on Flint, Michigan water supply, you'll get lots of news stories about this. So I would invite you to do that as an example of how we have to think past this ribbon cutting ceremony. So how and when do projects add value? Well, to do that, you have to look at the purpose of the organization, whatever the organization, not the project, which of course should be aligned with the organization, but what the project's, the organization's purpose is, the culture, structure, goals, and metrics of the organization. It comes down to strategy and executing strategy. It comes down to having a triple bottom line perspective of people, planet, and profit, a wider view of time and stakeholders, and a view of different projects taking place at the same time. And this comes from a really nice blog called Aris People, and there might even be some Aris people on the call. The question I have for you now, and I don't have any polls, I'm not as fancy as Dr. the last presenter. I don't want to mispronounce his name, so I'll just say the last esteemed presenter. My question for you is, who could this possibly be? Who has a view of an organization's structure and culture and metrics and goals, but also has a view of all the projects? Who could possibly do this? And I would assert that maybe, just maybe, it's the PMO. The Pmbok Guide, the new Pmbok Guide, the 7th edition, and I was proud to be on the editorial board for the 7th edition Pmbok Guide, talks to this. It says that projects are part of a system for value delivery, including this intention, strategy, projects, programs, and portfolios to execute them, and operations. That's the overall flow of an idea to steady state reality. PMOs work in that world. PMOs foster the delivery of outcomes-oriented capabilities. It's a fancy way of saying that they oversee multiple concurrent projects and think about the outcome. PMOs keep the big picture perspective. They're focused on continuous improvement, OPM3 as an example, knowledge transfer, per my example at the beginning of this, and transformation or change management. These are all things that come from the Pmbok Guide 7th edition, and they feed right into this idea of value delivery. Keep an eye on the time here. So how does this translate to sustainability? Because remember, the title of the talk, which changed a few times, is the value of project sustainability and the value of sustainability in projects. So there's definitely a connection here. What is that connection? Well, you should be familiar with the idea of a triple bottom line. This is the definition coming from Harvard Business School. From my perspective, here's Harvard across the river from Boston University. There's Fenway Park, where the Boston Red Sox play, and where Boston University is, in my office, is right behind that tree. The triple bottom line, and this is coming from Harvard, is a business concept that fancy word posits, that theorizes that firms should commit to measuring their social and environmental impact, as well as their financial performance, rather than only focusing on profit or the standard bottom line. So it involves this 3 Ps: profit, people, and planet. And not quite coincidentally, the name of my blog at pmisprojectmanagement.com is People, Planet, Profits, and Projects. So I add a 4th P to that. And just so you know, and this is not a profit-making thing, just a publicly available blog on PMI's website. This is my blog. I invite you to take a look at it. About 3 or 4 blog posts per month. Sometimes they're a little bit goofy. So this one is about the effect of climate change on the cranberry production in the United States, and some projects that are being instituted to try to protect or prevent the unavailability of cranberries. I would also like to make available to you some other resources. This is coming from a colleague in Australia, in Melbourne, Australia, named Alexandra Chapman. Some of you may know Alexandra. She leads a company called TOP, Totally Optimized Projects, and has been a thought leader in this area for decades, preaching some of these ideas. We found that we were of like mind. She gave me permission to share this graphic. It's really nice, and I'm not going to do the whole thing. I'd invite you to check out her website, but basically, projects are sets of tasks and activities that we all coordinate as project managers. And as a PMO, we orchestrate those project managers who are in turn leading those activities. Those activities yield outcomes. Those outcomes, and this is where we often stop our thinking, yields desired benefits. Those desired outcomes yield benefits. Benefits that could be money-oriented, or benefits that might be things like saving lives if it's a COVID-19 vaccine launch. So either way, they should be generating benefits, and those benefits taken together represent the gold here, value. And we need to keep checking that value against the drivers that should have launched the project in the first place. So value is only really value if it's the value that we wanted from the project, the value that we chartered the project for, the value that the outcomes of that project will deliver in the steady state. And that's key. Not at the ribbon cutting ceremony, but months and perhaps years and perhaps even decades or centuries afterwards. And if you look at culture, American culture, for example, Western culture in general, not as long-term focused as other cultures. Many Asian cultures think 5, 10, 100 years into the future as a sweeping generalization. So I'd invite you to check out Alexandra's site. Once again, back to the Pmbok guide. The new Pmbok guide is principles-based. It's about behaviors. It's about not methodologies, but how we think, how we treat decisions. It's got a key area on value delivery. So projects are about delivering value. It's got a key mention, or several, on sustainability. It actually, by word, mentions stewardship outside the organization, including environmental and social. So there's that connection right there in the Pmbok guide to the triple bottom line. In the Pmbok guide, there's a section under dimensions of quality that says, does the deliverable produce a positive impact on economic, social, and environmental parameters? Well, that's the triple bottom line. Economic, social, environment, people, maybe not in the right order. I'll try to do it in the right order. Profit, people, planet, in that order. So that should sound familiar. There it is again, the triple bottom line showing up literally in the Pmbok guide, finally. So how do we do this? I think Dr. Let me get the right name. I don't want to mess this up.
Sadi.
Sadi. Yeah. Dr. Sadi, thank you. Talked about the fact that we as project managers have to change our mind. And that means, I think, reset our minds and change our thinking. This is a graphic I use to explain this. As a project manager, if you think of this blue line here, and I don't know if you can see my cursor, but this blue line here represents the Gantt chart that we all know so well and love so well, from the starting milestone through the project, with dependencies, with milestones throughout, and threats being encountered. And we are examining that Gantt chart with our back. Maybe we have it in the back of our mind, but we have our back towards the future, which we, by the way, see as just a point in time. The steady state is like the ribbon cutting ceremony. What if we don't forget that? We keep our minds there, but what if we were to think in the other direction and take the entire Gantt chart and shrink that down to a point in time, just temporarily? Don't do this instead of looking at scheduling, and say that's project over 25 years is going to become a point in time. Let's think about the steady state, which really is a longer term time frame. And let's look at that in some detail. And we have the same kind of project management thing. We have threats that could occur when the project is turned up and running. We have benefits. Those benefits taken together are value. And let's just look forward into the future and bring that thinking back into the project. And check to see whether, are we thinking about, for example, social impacts of our project? Are we thinking about waste products from our project's product when it's running and doing what it's supposed to do for 10 years? Maybe there's an outcome like a non-disposable, a non-recyclable disposable coffee cup from a single serve coffee maker that's going to be in the billions and going into landfills and leaching out chemicals into water supplies. We tend not to think about that, but I think we should. And I think the more mature view of project management espoused in the 7th edition is kind of telling us to do that. So I'm suggesting that you don't shift to this thinking, but that you consider this bottom section here in your planning and get your team to get their binoculars out and look 5, 10, 20 years into the future, considering that the ribbon cutting ceremony is just a point in time and not the end of time. So I say we need both views. It's very good. And Dr. Sadi, we both like angry babies. So we have that let's get her done philosophy. We need it. We don't want to lose that. That's our personality. We are type A project management folks, or we are in a PMO that leads type A project management folks, get her done. But we also need this long-term view into the future. So we could say that there's classic project management, and I'm not talking about waterfall versus agile. I'm talking about just project management as it is now, focused on time, on budget, within scope, completing the scope that we said we do, meeting quality goals, and so forth. Versus what I'm now calling value-driven PM, and I was calling that value-driven PM before the Pmbok guide came out. Value-driven PM is looking at benefits, the collection of benefits over time in the steady state. That's value-driven PM. So what's the real difference here between classic project management and this new, or at least highly espoused, value PM? It's really answering one question. On the right, you see a classic project manager. She's thinking about the project. She's saying to herself, how do we get this done? Where are my resources? What are the threats? How can I stay under budget? How will I plan milestone celebrations leading up to that ribbon cutting ceremony? How do I get to that ribbon cutting ceremony? So those are the questions on the lower left. How do we stay under budget? How do we meet the schedule? How do we get the resources we need? That's fine. That's what she's thinking. The value PM, which could be the same person, I would say should be the same person, is asking a different question, maybe an additional question. Why are we doing this project now? Many of you are saying to yourself, this is what the PMO does. This is what a portfolio or a program manager does. They admit or eject programs based on that. So that's true. And program and portfolio managers do indeed, and should indeed, have more of this value PM philosophy. I'm asking that we push that down to the project managers. So back to the questions that the value-driven project manager is asking. She's asking, why are we doing this project? How does it contribute to the mission, vision, and values? What's the connection between what we say we'll do up here, our day-to-day operations, through programs, projects, and operations? I left out portfolios. Through portfolios, programs, and projects. How do we connect the strategy to the day-to-day operations? How do we link it? How do we assure that the project provides us with benefits that are sustainable, and if you really want to go triple bottom line thinking, that won't have other impacts that will be negative? For example, producing pollution, an element of pollution or social discomfort, such as the Flint, Michigan water cutover. So you need both. This is another way to do it. You need to ask the question, here's why we're doing this project, and project managers should be pointing that out to their teams throughout. And yes, then you focus on the day-to-day management and oversight of the project, and here's how we're going to do this. And you become a project leader in the way that you direct task activities. So I'm wrapping up, and I'm wrapping up a little bit early because I do have a faculty meeting coming on, but I will stay on for some questions. But I do have a few more slides, 76 to be precise. No, just a couple more slides. I would like to talk about Boston University's project management program in this light. First, a little about the program. This is our mission, and I'll just read the highlighted words. We'd like to instill in our diverse student population, and we have lots of outstanding students, including from Turkey. In fact, my teaching assistant this semester, Sanya, is from Turkey. To instill in our diverse student population the personal and intellectual skills needed to excel in changing, globally ambiguous, culturally diverse, and uncertain environments. What's the goal? Produce critical thinkers, innovative leaders with the skills, knowledge, and agility to excel in the realm of project, program, and portfolio management. We are pretty highly rated, 6th best master's online program in the North America, according to US News. And we just completed our GAC recertification. We've been certified for decades by PMI's GAC, and there's other certifications as well. But to get to the point, we have instituted a new 700 level course. For those familiar with numbering systems in the US, typically undergraduate school courses are 100 through 400. Graduate school courses are 500, 600, 700, and capstone courses are 800. So there's a meaningfulness to the numbers. 782 would be a very high level course. We introduced this last semester, actually 2 semesters ago, and we're now going to make it a standard part of our curriculum. It's called Project Value Strategies. Tagline is bringing value home to your organization. And also homing value in the philosophy of project management. And here's some of the objectives of the course. It's focused on benefits realization. It's focused on sustainability and triple bottom line thinking. And it adopts a lot of the concepts from Agile in order to do that. We ran this first experiment in AD 782 about 8 months ago. It had 10 students. I loved it because the students were from all over the place in terms of their practice areas. We had archaeologists, tourism company executives, pharmaceutical PMs and executives, IT and telecom executives, most of them with 10 plus years of experience. Some of the students were actually older than me. So we ran this course. And we got feedback like, I found this to be extremely applicable and useful to my current work. Having so many guest lectures, which I did, brought a ton of value for me. The topics were engaging and relevant. I actually looked forward to class each week, which is always good to hear from students. And the bottom line from my value perspective is it had the highest scores I have ever achieved in decades of teaching. And I generally do okay. But this had the highest scores I've ever achieved as an instructor and the highest overall course ratings I've ever received. So that completes what I had to say. I may have bought you back some time. I hope this delivered value to you. Now it's your turn to add some value back to the whole group, because to me, we all learn together. And I'm going to ask Mustafa to jump in and pronounce the phrase at the bottom. I found the correct words, I think, but yes. I will murder this phrase, so I will ask Mustafa to say it properly.
Okay. Sorular ve cevaplar.
See, I wouldn't have said anything like that.
Okay. So we have questions. Thank you very much, Rich.
You're welcome.
For this great presentation. We have some questions. I have also one.
Yes, go.
So let me just read Mr. Nihat Baydar's question. He says that in the traditional view of project management, if a project manager completed a project and had adhered to the triple constraints of time, cost, and scope, the project was considered as a success. Should we now add value to this triple, he asks?
Simple answer is yes. Then the next follow-up question is, how the heck do we do that? So I would say that what we have to manage, see, this is a problem, right? This is the quandary. If you're a project manager, you don't want to stay on the project for 10 years afterwards to see that it's sustainable. I understand that. Project managers really want to get on to their next project. But maybe there's a way we can measure the thoughtfulness, the ability of the project. I guess we change project to a verb. Let's project this project's impact economically, ecologically, socially for 10 years. And if you were this single serve coffee maker, for example, the company that produced that was, this is a real case, was actually a very green company called Green Mountain Coffee. The company that they owned at the time was called Keurig. And if they had done an assessment of the project's projected capability to be sustainable, they would have found that this would produce 30, 40 billion non-recyclable K-cups that would go into landfills. Now, would that have changed the design? Would they have taken the risk of delaying the project's release until they found a recyclable plastic? Because now they do have one. Don't know, but it would be a way of adding that to the measurement of scope, cost, and time, this kind of forecast of impact. And again, I don't take anyone's right to make money away. So I'm also talking about the ability of the product or service, the product of the project, to generate revenue reliably. But I do not, don't get me wrong, I do not mean to make the project manager responsible for that. I just want to make them responsible for thinking about that and putting it into their planning horizon. So I bumbled around there, but I hope I somewhat answered your question.
Actually, my question is also related with this first question, because I see a challenge.
Oh yeah.
In terms of time dependency, because as we know, projects are temporary based, so they have an ending time. But when we think about benefits and value, they are generally realized after the projects are finished. So because of this time dependency, wouldn't there be a challenge?
It is a challenge for the project manager, but I believe this is a conference for PMOs, right? So maybe this is something the PMO needs to step up to. Maybe the PMO needs to look in the longer term, because the PMO, well, sometimes they're temporary, as we all know. But generally now they are kind of a fixture in an organization. Maybe they could take on the responsibility for looking at projects in the longer term. So when I had the Supergirl image up before, I was trying to make the point that maybe it's the PMO that can step up and take this role. I'm sure some of you don't want that role, but they are a more likely place, per your exact point. They are a more likely point of responsibility than an individual project manager who, and I know the personality. I had 2,700 project managers that I supported. Where's my next project? I'm done with this one. Done. Give me my next project. And that's good. We like that attitude. We need that attitude. So we might have to have someone else at an executive level or a PMO take on this more steady state view of whether a project has been planned properly for long-term thinking, economic, ecological, and social. And are they getting that thinking philosophy into their PMO and project managers? It's a good question, and you're right, it's a challenge.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, PMOs are very critical in terms of applying this new mindset, value-driven project management.
Yeah, and just if you haven't read through the Pmbok Guide, 7th edition, as well as the the standard. So the new Pmbok Guide, if you don't know, is actually 2 books in one. And the standard for project management is the kind of the principles-based guide, and it's shorter. In fact, the whole Pmbok Guide, including both books, is shorter than the prior edition. Highly recommend you take a look at it. A lot of people worked very hard to try to get, they couldn't answer these questions because you're asking, the hard questions, but they set you up to at least understand that you should ask these questions and how you might answer them in your own organization.
Yeah, I see. Thank you. And we may have one more question. I also allow participants to unmute themselves if they want. They may just join us by their voice and ask questions.
Yeah, I'm listening. If not, I'm glad to escape to my faculty meeting. Well, glad it might be a strong word. I will be willing to join my faculty meeting.
Okay, thank you very much, Rich. This was very valuable. Thank you for joining and sharing your experience and knowledge.
Yeah, that is the best compliment you can give, that it's valuable. So thank you very much. I trust that you, well, I know because Mustafa is running this, you will get value out of the other presentations as well in the overall conference, and certainly from exchanging knowledge with each other. So thank you very, very much. I appreciate the time, and I appreciate your listening, and good luck.